Hey there, it's Dan Kenner with episode number 105 of the podcast. Today we're talking to Matt Guzman about teaching children emotional health through your writing. So Matt is a middle grade author. He's published three books now after the interview that we have. And his focus and passion is helping younger children understand the importance of emotional health, how to regulate it, how it's actually normal to struggle with emotional health regulation. As many of us adults, sometimes we have our own issues, but it's a great conversation. He's very passionate about it, and I think you will enjoy it. So stick around for that. Before we get into the actual interview, let's talk about some updates. So last week, I talked about how I had completed the first draft of Demon Blooded. So just for some context for people just listening, for some reason, my pantsing brain decided that it would be fun to write a six-book series, a YA kind of portal fantasy type series. Each of the books will be from a different perspective. So, kind of interesting endeavor. Most of the main characters will be, so it's around six main characters. So that's why the six-book series. And they're not always together, but for the most part, a lot of them are together. So it's been an interesting endeavor. I'm absolutely loving the story so far. Finishing the first draft of the second book, Demon Blooded, was exhilarating. And I actually had an interview, which you'll hear soon in the next few weeks about how we should celebrate your wins. And I don't think that I spent as much time as I probably should have celebrating finishing Demon Blooded because I immediately wanted to dive into the next thing. Now, after considering my options, I do need to write the second book of the fantasy, kind of epic fantasy four-book series that I'm writing. The first book is called The Etcher's Plight. I finished that about a year ago, and I thought, you know what, I'll read back through The Etcher's Plight, do some editing, and prepare to write the second book, which is going to be called The Utterer's Demise. Um, well, that didn't happen because naturally, because my brain kind of picks random paths. I went down to start reading the first book and thought, you know what? Demon Blooded is still fresh in my mind. I don't want to lose that traction. And I'm not burned out from the story because this is from a different character's perspective. I'm not burned out from the characters. So I figured let's just save time and actually start writing the third book. So the third book of the Hidden Heritage series, which is the six-book series, is called Dwarf Blooded. And I've only written a few thousand words, but it's been a blast so far. We'll see what actually happens when I finish the third book. I may get burned out and need to jump over to that epic fantasy series. But, I'm not too worried about that right now. I'm just enjoying the writing process. And I'm preparing for my first writers conference. So those of you who have been listening for a while know that there is a conference in Provo, Utah called LTUE, Life, the Earth, and Everything. The Life, the Universe, and Everything. Wow, I said that wrong. LTUE. And one of my writers group writers, my friends, cajoled me into sharing a table with him. So I've never done vendoring before. I've never done any of this before. So been doing tons of research to prepare a table to at least look kind of good. I've been preparing all sorts of things, and I just got my book stock yesterday, most of it. I still have a little bit to get, big stacks of books. We'll see how it goes. I kind of been nervous to talk about my books in person. Never really done that before. I'm not even great about talking about my books on social media or marketing myself. So we'll see how this goes. Regardless, one thing that I think is kind of fun. Now, if you're watching the YouTube video, you'll see this. If not, then you won't. But just because everybody knows conferences, you get free stuff, right? For the first time, I made these. You can see here this bookmark. You can ignore my ring light there. I designed this myself. So there's the back of it. I'm going to be giving these out at the conference. So there's the QR code to get the novella shielded for free, and then there's a QR code for the actual series, and then it's attached to this little mini flashlight because why not, right? Light Bear Chronicles, it's very appropriate. Now, are people actually going to be excited about this flashlight? Who knows? But I feel like I got to do something to get out there. In any case, that is middle of February, so we're looking at about 3 weeks, just short of 3 weeks. Actually, I think that might be 2 weeks. Goodness gracious, time goes fast. That's what I'm preparing for, other than writing. Now, I have been doing what I can to get back into Amazon ads, try to figure that out. I haven't unlocked the secrets quite yet, but I'm trying, and I'm hoping this will be a better year for sales. Last year, I didn't really put a lot of attention on it, primarily because I was just trying to get another set of books out. Now that the kids of Cyber City books are out, I have 8 published books. I feel like it's a good place to start in terms of getting sales. So we're gonna keep running with those and see what we can do. In other news, from a homesteading perspective, not a lot has changed other than there has been a great melt. The past week has been very warm. I know some of you might be listening from warmer places, but we're looking at highs in the low 40s, sometimes upper 40s. That's very, very warm, particularly for January and February. There's not really a change in sight with the warm weather. I don't dislike the warm weather, although it's not coming with moisture. So that's a little bit concerning, right? I don't know that we've ever been in a drought situation here in Idaho. At least we haven't been since we've been here. Hopefully, we don't get to that spot. Now, we have our own private well because we live out in the country, and I don't, it's really hard to say how much water's in there because you can't really test. Well, maybe you can test that thing. I've never tried. We're hoping that our well supply will continue to get bolstered by the rain weather. Hopefully, we get more rain weather. It's just been cloudy. Now, for the animals, it's been okay, other than the severe changes in temperature can cause their bodies to react negatively. They can get, sicknesses, colds, pneumonias. They're not called those things, but they're very similar in animals. And so far, none of them have been sick, but we just have to keep a close eye on that, which I'm grateful that nothing has happened with that. I think, they're just glad to have a break milking. They like milking, they don't dislike it, but I think they just kind of like mulling about and chilling. They're all starting to get quite wide. So they're all pregnant, and you can see their bellies. They get huge because most of them have, 2 to 3 babies. We did have one goat have 4 babies one year. That was fascinating. Because you know anything about goats, they have udders with only 2 teats on them, unlike cows which have 4. So they can't support 4 babies because there's too much conflict, right? One of them, they can do 3 kind of. There's still some fighting, but at one point that the first baby who's stronger than the others will get his or her fill. And then they'll let the other 2 have their fill. But with the fourth one just kind of gets bullied. So what we had to do was pull 2 of them and bottle feed them. Hopefully, we don't have 4 babies again. Bottle feeding was fine. They become very, very friendly goats, but you have to feed them a lot when they're very little. So it's like having a newborn baby. You have to wake up very early, stay up late to make sure they get the milk they need. We don't generally get up in the middle of the night, but still something to keep in mind. Hopefully, we're looking at 2 to 3 babies each. Then we can sell those and recapture some of the cost for the hay, which we have to buy in bulk. But yeah, other than that, nothing super crazy. Just enjoying the warmer weather. I don't know if it's good for the environment or not in Idaho because we're very much used to colder weather, but I'll take what I can. It feels like spring outside. So it's kind of nice to go outside and just enjoy some fresh air that doesn't freeze your nose hairs and or your eyelashes, which yes, that does happen on occasion when it's quite cold here. Other than that, yeah, nothing new. Just trying to get a handle on the eggs. A couple months ago, I was saying we weren't getting any eggs. Now we are swimming in eggs. Talking 12 to 14 eggs per day, which we do keep up relatively well. But at one point we had probably 60 eggs just sitting on our counter, thinking, okay, we better start eating more eggs. We're starting to get overrun. But my wife ended up making some freezer meals and some meals ahead with eggs, so we caught up a little bit. Hopefully, we can get back to the preservation stage. If we can preserve bunches of eggs, then save them for a rainy day, right? It'd be nice if the egg production drops again for whatever reason, then we'll have a bunch of eggs stored on the shelf. But I think, we're not in the space for that quite yet. We need to get some more resources and a little bit more time to because it takes some time to preserve them the correct way. Yeah, I don't believe that there's any other updates in terms of authoring or homesteads. We can go ahead and shift over to the interview portion of the podcast with Matt. Hey, Matt, how are you doing today?
Hey, I'm doing awesome. How about yourself?
Doing very, very well. I'm actually thrilled to talk to another middle grade author because as of last year, I became a middle grade author, which is a new experience for me. But how long have you been writing and publishing?
Well, I've been writing since I was 10 years old. But published my first book was January of last year. So I'm still a newbie, barely 1 year.
Well, I mean, I still feel like a newbie, and I published nearly 4 years ago. But I think that's awesome. So up till now, you've published 2 books, and you have a third one. as we're recording, coming out very soon, like in a few days. Is that correct?
Yep, that's correct. Reed and Reese and the Scroll of Life, Book 3, will be released on Saturday, January 20th of 2024.
I love that. That's so exciting. Book releases are really fun.
Yeah.
They're always very exciting. So I'm looking forward to picking up your books and potentially handing them to my kids. But why middle grade, if you don't mind me asking? Why specifically that age group?
Well, it was kind of a journey for me. I love science fiction. I love psychological thrillers. And over the years, I've written different types of books. I've collaborated with a friend, and I have a big Christian following of friends. And so I wanted to write something that I knew that my mother could pick up and not be offended by it, because even young adult is filled with, like, sex, violence, swearing. And I kind of wanted to stay away with that because I wanted it to be accessible to everyone. And as we know from like Harry Potter and other types of middle grade or young adult, is that adults still enjoy reading younger stories. So it's like I wanted to write something that could reach everybody. And then because I'm obsessed with psychological health, emotional health, I've studied it for years, for about 15 years. I wanted to basically write the story that my 12-year-old self wanted to read. Like when I was a kid and my parents divorced, I had a lot of emotional issues. I have a lot of problems that kids nowadays have. Of course, it's worse nowadays, but even then, and I didn't have somebody in my life to be able to communicate with, reach out to me, to tell me, hey, it doesn't have to be this difficult. Here's some tools, here's some ways of thinking about it. And so, what I wanted to do was create a story that was accessible to everyone, write a story that my 12-year-old self would have wanted to read, and then put psychological tools and information in there that kids can really kind of open their mind and think, you know what? It doesn't have to be this bad. I can communicate. I can talk to a parent. I can talk to somebody and kind of get the help I need because, what I see today is that more and more kids are being isolated and they're
Mm.
having these emotional turmoil that's going on, and it's causing all sort of dysfunctional behavior. And because they're not opening up and expressing what's inside their mind, and it's because they feel shame or they feel guilt about it, or they feel alone, like I'm the only one that has these crazy thoughts. But if we can get kids to open up and be able to understand that, hey, this is a shared experience, we're all human, we're all in this together, these are the things that we all deal with, and maybe help a child to feel less alone. So that's kind of like the big goals that I have.
I would say those are big. I mean, but I mean, in all reality, those are super important things, particularly in this day and age. I mean, definitely things have changed from when we were kids. I mean, I don't know your age, but I'm kind of guessing we're similar in
Yeah.
that area. But yeah, definitely, I imagine the things that I read and did as a kid is far different from what they are today. So I'm curious to know, I love your passion for
Thank you.
this, mental health, emotional health. I think that can be such a challenge already for kids, going to school and with their peers and just having to kind of learn together how to handle this. But how do you ensure that your writing helps deliver those skills? Like how did you pre-plot how you were going to infuse your books with those skills and trainings, or did it just come as you wrote it?
Well, I had I would say a lot of the way that I do things is intuitive. So I learned some information, but I don't dive too deep into it because I kind of have a chameleon personality. So if
Mm.
I pick up somebody's middle grade book, or if I pick up someone else's book and I read it, like my brain starts syncing with that kind of way of communicating and way of talking. So I try to be careful not to absorb too much and kind of let my voice come out as a natural voice versus trying to mimic someone else. And so what I had learned is that, with middle grade stories, you want to keep the story first. Like as
Mm.
adults, we can go to a movie, a Marvel movie, and we can kind of see the ideologies or the messages, they're kind of like in your face, like down with big corporations, or whatever the storyline is. So with kids, though, you don't want to do that because you kind of lose them. They're like, what is this
Hmm.
guy talking about? So my goal is to be very light on, like the ideas, but have them expressed through different characters. And what I really focus in on is the inner world of what the protagonist is going through. So I have him think, dark thoughts, or I have him think, angry thoughts or anxious thoughts or whatever. And then in the story, I normalize his visiting a therapist. And so he's like recalling these different tools that he's learned from his therapist, not always in a like, oh, yeah, this is so great, but more like, oh, yeah, my therapist told me this or that. But so I try to keep the story first and make it feel natural so that, a troubled 12-year-old child will kind of relate to this kid. Because one thing I noticed too with a lot of stories that are told by adults is that when they have a kid character, they kind of idealize the kid's motives. Like the idea the kid is pure and like always wants to do what's right. But it's like, where did this idea come from? Because kids are just small versions of us, right? And we're always struggling with the darkness inside us. We're always struggling to do what's right. And so I wanted to make that part of it feel real. So a lot of the concepts that I put in there are very subtle. They're not like in your face, like this is the right way to go. Because actually, I'm just a person too. I don't know all the right answers. And I've heard before that a good author is someone that asks good questions, right? So that's kind of where my focus is on the books. Is I don't want to a person to read the book and come away thinking, oh, this is what the writer says I should do, but come away thinking, man, I can really relate to his struggles. And this is how he solved those problems. Maybe I can do something similar.
I really like that because that is just a natural tendency, particularly for, I mean, when I was a kid, how many times did you think if I was a wizard in the Harry Potter world, what house would I be in, right? Like it's just so easy for kids, particularly. I mean, adults do it too. I obviously do. But yeah, kind of put yourself in their place or compare it to the way you're thinking and the things that you're doing. And so, I think that's a really important and natural way how authors like yourself and myself can reach these young readers and help them learn important things. And but I love that you said focus on the story, kind of then bring in these natural feeling aspects that don't feel so overwhelming and adult-like, right?
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
sometimes it's so easy for authors to just tell what they want to say or what they want the reader to do. And I think that's more off-putting to kids because
yeah,
they're like, I just want to read, I just want to have fun. I'm here for the story, right?
yeah, yeah,
Um, and I mean, based on the covers of your books, Reedon looks like he does some pretty amazing things. Yeah, the middle grade covers can be so fun, the liberties that you can take for those. But where did you get the idea for this specific story? I mean, you've always had this passion for emotional health and helping to children to develop this. But what gave you the idea for this story specifically?
Well, I'm like every author's a little different on what's their strengths and their weaknesses. For me, ideas have always been the easy part. Like I
Hmm.
literally think of a new idea every day.
Hmm.
There's usually a time of the day where your brain's a little more creative and ideas go through. So I just have this way of like, oh wow, that would make a really cool character. That would make a really good idea. And so I actually remember the genesis of this particular story. I was having dinner with my mom and I looked up outside at the moon and then I just imagined the moon cracking and breaking and
Hmm.
this child looking up. And so the cover on book 1 actually is the literal genesis of the idea that came from.
That's cool.
And then I love metaphors and I love mystery and psychological thrillers. So obviously the broken moon is kind of a metaphor for a broken mind. And
Hmm.
then I just kind of went down that trail of what all that could mean and like what is he struggling with and why did his mind break and what happened. And my tagline for this that most people don't get, so I don't use it, but it kind of sums it up is Wizard of Oz for nerds, Inception style. Now, have you ever
Okay.
seen the movie Inception?
Have, yes.
Okay, so when I saw Inception, that became my all-time favorite movie. And it wasn't just because of the dream world, but it was because of the ending and how the director skillfully created this beautiful story that you felt completely involved in. And yet at the end, he still left it up to us to decide what parts of it might have been reality, what parts of it might have been the dream world, and people could debate about it and could but I felt like he deliberately did not give you the answer. Like you could watch that movie 50 times and you'll never know for sure
Mhm.
exactly what the director thinks is reality. And that's kind of what I wanted to do with my books is I wanted to bring that concept of inception to young kids and be like, especially today, because what I'm really fearful for other people, especially young people, is that there's so much misinformation, there's so much manipulation and media and stuff. And when a child is very young, they have this natural instinct to trust adults and to trust the world and be
Mhm.
like, oh, this is reality. And it's like, I wanted to give one message that, like, you get to choose what you believe because a lot of times today society is trying to push beliefs into people's minds and then they don't question it. They think this is what I believe, this is the truth. But in reality, a lot of people believe things that aren't true. So that's kind of the idea of what I wanted to encapsulate in the book was this belief. Have you ever read the book Think and Grow Rich, Napoleon Hill?
I have not actually, no.
Okay. And that book too is part of the foundation in mine is this idea of belief. It's like what we choose to believe makes our reality.
Mhm.
So that's kind of like the underlying message in all 7 books.
I love that. Oh, seven, all seven of your books or all
Well, the,
seven?
it's going to be a 7 book
Got it.
series.
Okay. I
So the
assumed so. I was like, this looks like it's gearing up to be a Michael Bay saga type situation. I don't know if you've ever read Michael Bay.
no,
Um, but it's just another kind of middle grade. It said it was 7 books and it ultimately blew up, and I think it's now like 12. I don't even know. But it's just kind of funny how the original were seven and then it expanded. But no, I love that. I love the way you described that. And I could dive deep into the whole narrative of, believe what you want, society, media. It's just wild. The types of things that the internet tries to tell you. And critical thinking is a skill that's so, so, so important in every person, right?
yep,
Um, Particularly children, but it's not a super easy skill to learn when you're not being challenged. You're not given that
yep,
space to grow and think. So I think it sounds like Reedon is put to the test in this way, and
hmm,
he's, kind of compelled, I almost said forced, but compelled to exercise his critical thinking with respect to whatever is going on. I love the cover of the first one, by the way.
thank you.
Um, it's then hearing that explanation just makes it even more cool to know. I know that there's not all authors are very thoughtful in the way that they design their covers. I am not always that thoughtful myself either. A lot of authors are just like, let's just get a cover that will catch people's eye, which no problem. Like, there's no judgment here. I think that's awesome. But you definitely have really thought through this series. Is the intent then for, do you have all 7 books planned then already for what they're going to be like, or not quite?
Yeah, actually have the rough draft of all of them written already.
Oh,
So
okay.
it's
So
just, yeah.
that's that's awesome. Did you pre-plot I mean, you mentioned being intuitive. Are you a plotter or do you just kind of write as you go intuitively?
I'm 50-50. Like a lot of people say the pantser versus the plotter, and then there's kind of like a spectrum. So I'm
Mm,
definitely probably right in the middle. So when I started book one, I definitely started what's it called? Not natural, but when you just exploring, you just writing, you just start writing.
discovery writing
Yeah,
is how some
discovery.
people.
Thank you. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the one. And but by probably the middle of book two, I would say the different plot points started to become clear. And by the
Nice.
time I finished book two, I had the ideas for all of the next 5. So, and then usually what I do is when I'm out driving all day, I will come up with ideas when my brain's when your unconscious mind starts spitting out the ideas, and I'll just write them into my little notes into my phone. and then I'll collect them. So usually by the end of each book, I have about 6,000 words of different ideas and bits of dialogue and plot points. And probably about 25 to 50% of that never actually makes it into the book, but it just kind of informs, the big story that's going on in my mind. So yeah, I would say by the end of book two, I had, the whole thing planned out, at least the big plot points, the big important points, and then the little details I still kind of discovery, right?
I mean, I think it's awesome. First of all, I commend you for being organized
Mhm.
with your thoughts because I think that thinking time outside of writing is so key. Yeah, that's, a lot of people that complain or rightly so. I'm not, discouraging it, but they say I have writer's block. I have a hard time writing forward. I haven't yet run into that, and it's primarily because of that outside thinking time. When
Yep.
I'm driving, when I'm doing dishes or whatever,
Yep.
listening to music, I just let my mind wander. And it's amazing the random ideas that can come up. However, the commendation comes from actually writing it down. To this day, I don't think I've written down one idea. And I'm not recommending this at all, but for some reason, the act of writing it down for me feels like it steals the excitement from the idea.
Interesting.
And I know it's stupid. It's so stupid. But I just tell myself, if I get to the page and I remember this idea, then it's meant to go in the book. However, I am more like 90% discovery writer, like 95% discovery writer,
Gotcha.
5% plot. I don't plot. It just doesn't work for me. For me, that steals a lot of the fun of the writing process. So that's why that works for me. And, I haven't forgotten any of the really key ideas. Well, actually, how would I know? Because I would have forgotten them. But at the end of the day, is I figure if it's meant to be in the book, I'll just remember it. So, what app do you use to keep track of all these notes, if you don't mind me asking?
Actually, I've been trying to find a way to be more efficient because I've just basically been using the notes apps on my iPhone,
Oh, nice.
and
Yeah.
then I will copy and paste it into because I have both Microsoft Word and Google Docs on my phone.
Mhm.
So then I'll just paste them over into that. But with all this AI and new technology, I'm like, there's got to be an app where I can just do it all at once, where I can just pop it open and it'll consolidate it and move it over.
You'd think. I don't have any recommendations on that front. Sorry. As a non-note taker, I don't have any ideas. However, if any of the listeners, if you have any ideas for Matt, reach out
There you
and
go.
say, hey, I
Yes,
use
please.
this app. I have used Evernote historically back when I thought I was going to take notes and then ended up not ever. But most of the time it's the notes app. I text myself an embarrassing number of times to remind myself of things, but I don't think you should probably text yourself notes. It gets kind of annoying. Um, so how do you, as an adult person, I mean, clearly adults can write middle grade, all sorts of adults do it. It's very possible. But how, for you personally, did you stay within the minds of a 12-year-old? Like, do you have any recommendations or advice for someone who might want to write a middle grade book?
Yeah, well, every person's a little different. So I'm not sure exactly. For me, I've always had a childlike mind. I think I think one of the big aspects of being a child is curiosity, right? We hear that a lot. And I think as adults, we it's not that we lose our curiosity, we just stop engaging it, we stop using it, we stop having to rely on it for anything, right? We just get caught up in life. We got a job, we got bills to pay, we got family to take care of, whatever, we got all these responsibilities. And it's like, where's time for curiosity, right? And so for me, it's something I'm I'm divorced and no kids. I've been divorced like 15 years now. So basically most of my life I've been single. And it's just something that I never lost. It's like when I went through a divorce and I went through therapy and I started learning all these psychological tools, I just became obsessed. I was just like, oh, this. And so I was just super curious about, psychology and therapy and tools. And then the same thing with health. I had some health problems for the last 15 years. So I've like had to study different ways to improve my health and to stay healthy. And so it's like I just got in the habit long, long time ago to be curious, to always use my curiosity. And I just never lost that. And I think that's the big key of being a child, because when you're 12 years old, you don't have this repertoire or foundation of experience and knowledge to look at life and be like, oh, I know this because I have this. It's like you're young, you barely just started learning experiences. So when I write Ree's character, I just come with this sense of wonder, this sense of curiosity, this yeah, he's got a strong personality, and a lot of it's driven by like various trauma that he's gone through. But for the most part, he's open mentally, like an adult might come into that same situation and be super judgmental or super like, no, I see it this way, and then their mind is not open to other possibilities. But I put him in situations where basically anything is possible. The universe is wide open to him. And so, for me, I think it was just channeling back into that younger version of myself. And I have a lot of memories from that age when, that were really strong in my mind. So, but like I said, too, I also have that chameleon personality. So it's very easy for my mind to kind of like in tune with, and that's why when I like create my characters, it's like I'm switching from character to character. My mind goes completely into their different minds. So, everyone's a little different, but that's kind of my process.
I mean, I love that. I love your take on curiosity because I was just, trying to remember myself when I was younger, and I also haven't really lost that, mind for curiosity. And I guess uh, the my thoughts wandering and spinning into some random tale. It's a little bit hilarious when I'll zone out or something. My wife's like, "What are you thinking out?" I'm like, "Do you really want to know what I'm thinking about?" She's like, "Depends." And I'll tell her, and she's just like, "That is insane. Like, why would you possibly be thinking about that?" And I was like, "Because why not, right?" Stories need to be told. I don't know. So yeah, that it's hilarious because when you watch kids, I have a funny story about that, which I'm deciding whether or not to say. They're just wandering. You can tell their minds are just kind of like spinning out of control as they're just walking down the street and they're laughing and they're playing and they're just having a grand old time in their mind. And it's amazing how the world quells that. It's just
Yeah.
like the weights of the world and responsibilities. Um, anyway, I was it's somewhat relevant to observing children. When I was in high school, I was part of a high school musical play where I had to act as a 12-year-old.
Oh,
And, it's a little bit funny because I was instructed by my directors to observe, go to an elementary school and like observe them, just like sit
wow.
after school and watch. I remember feeling so awkward. So I was like, I'm not a creep, I promise. Like I had to like be as inconspicuous as possible as I was
Yeah.
observing these kids walking down the street. But, I think books like that are, like you said, exactly the type of book that I would have loved to read at that age. I mean, I still love to read those books. And I watch my children read, and just the wonder and joy when they finish that book and they just have this thirst for another, like, I need another book, right? Because this is so fun. It's so satisfying. And, my kids have even written their own books because they just have these ideas they want to run with. And I encourage them, like, cool, let's do it. Let's write it down. Um, but I mean, how fun for you to be able to write this and, hopefully help children recognize the reality of darkness and just the reality of thoughts and how to, reshape our minds to be more emotionally healthy. I think the biggest challenge that I found as a middle grade author is reaching the right audience.
Yeah.
So for you, how are you approaching that? How have you found your audience both digitally and, physically in person?
Well, I'm definitely still a learner when it comes to that. The challenge is that, middle grade is still something that parents buy for their kids, right? That 10
Yeah.
to 12-year-old age group. For me, I definitely target the 12-year-old, the seventh grade, that
Mhm.
kind of tough year. And so it's been a challenge. I have not been successful 100% or definitely as I want to go. But right now it's just kind of like one to one connections. So like when I go out and about doing my door dashing, I wear my shirts and I have my business cards and I have magnets on my car, and I'm constantly all day long getting conversations. And as soon as I meet someone, within 30 seconds, people are interested. You posted something on TikTok recently about, when people find out you're an author, they're like, "Whoa," that's all they remember. It's like
Mm-hmm.
you're an
Yeah.
author, and they imagine, you're like Stephen King with $1 million and stuff.
Yep.
But
Every time.
so I was kind of unexpected. Like when I went into this, it was more about like being able to do what I love and have autonomy and be able to support myself so I can travel a little bit, But I was like, oh wow, people have a lot of respect when you say you're an author. Like they look at you a little differently. And it's funny, I laugh because I managed restaurants for 20 years, and that by far was way more challenging, way more stressful. You had to be way more creative because you're dealing with people in real time all day long. And it's like writing is like fun. It's like just I love it. It's like just I get to do what I enjoy and stuff. I haven't made enough money yet doing that, but the point is when people meet you and they're like, "Oh, you're an author," like their eyes light up. And so I've got people all over town where, I've given my car, they've bought my books, and then every time they see me, they're like, "Oh, I'm only at chapter 6. I'm sorry." They apologize, for not finishing the book.
That's awesome.
So it right now it's still a slow process where it's just the one-on-one. I am joining Brian Cohen's Amazon ad school this year because I know that my Amazon sales page needs a lot of work. So I'm going to work on that this year to try and reach my target audience. But yeah, trying to figure out, like if I had, I'm spending a ton of money on creating the books and I'm capped out on what I can spend. So at some point, once the 7 books are published, I want to steer that time and money into marketing and try to
Hmm.
figure out, like Facebook ads and Instagram ads and Amazon I already mentioned, and, going to book fairs. Like last year, I went to a book fair and I made some connections, sold some books, got some people on my email list. But the time and the money that I spent in going, it's a huge investment. So
Hmm.
I'm kind of in the in between time where I'm stuck with time and money. It's like I have time and money to make the books, but I don't have a lot of time and money to find my readers. So it's like a catch 22 right now.
I totally understand where you are because I'm in a similar spot with my books. It's kind of like, publishing is very expensive. So I can write. The idea part, the writing part, not a challenge for me. So currently I'm sitting on a few completed drafts of books that I'm thinking, I don't really know when I'll actually publish these. We're looking at like nearly 400,000 words worth
Oh,
of
wow.
drafts.
Nice.
But it's just like, all right, just keep writing, keep plugging along. But finding the readers is the big challenge, and there's tons of resources. Brian Cohen's course, I actually joined that last year. Very helpful. It
Nice.
does require time, so just be
Yeah.
aware of that. There's a lot there to consume, in a positive way, but you just got to make time for it. In any case, I think the connection piece though is really cool. I mean, you are literally a driving marketing machine, which I think is so cool. I mean, what I've never even thought about being a Door Dasher and also having your swag. And do you carry books with you by any chance in your
I
car?
did
I don't
for
know
a
if that is
while,
that
but
allowed. I don't know. Maybe that's not
yeah.
allowed as a Door Dasher. I don't know if there's rules.
Actually, it's funny you brought that up because I gave a card to a customer and I saw her again yesterday. So I'm really discreet. Like I constantly go to places where there's like 10 and 12-year-old kids walking around, and I'm really tempted to talk to them directly, but I know I'm just one out of 100. I'm gonna upset a parent. So I'm like, no, I don't
Yeah,
want to put a stink around my name.
danger for sure. Sure, but I can only imagine. But I think if my DoorDasher showed up at my door, I don't DoorDash very often, like very rarely. But if they had like an author shirt on, I would 100% talk to them about that. I'd be like, "What? That's super cool."
Yeah.
How fun though. I've also thought about going into elementary schools and like speaking in elementary schools.
Hmm.
Just once again,
Yep.
time and money and everything. So I don't know if that'll actually happen, but I do plan on providing free copies to the at least the library, school libraries. just taking them to the librarians or, whatnot, making sure they're in the elementary and middle schools around here. So we'll see if that
That
does
reminds me,
anything.
I actually got accepted last month into. I live in San Diego, and they have a local indie author program.
Oh,
So I
nice.
just got accepted into their program. So I'm going to go to the reception next Friday. And from what I understand, they're going to set up the book inside a display with other local indie authors.
How
And then they're
cool.
going to take that display and then once a month move it around the county of San Diego to different libraries. So I don't know how much exposure that's going to give me, but that sounds, and it's all free. Like I didn't have to pay for anything. I just got accepted, and then so
That is
little things like that.
awesome. Seriously, though, congratulations. I think that should be, you have to let me know in a few months if you notice any
Yeah, yeah, well, for
changes
sure.
from that. So, but I think aside from the building the business and marketing perspective, that's always going to be challenging in this world of noise.
Yep,
Um, I think it's particularly challenging for middle grade authors, primarily because, the parents kind of have to be the target a little bit because,
yep,
12-year-olds don't always have their own funds to just go shopping. Sometimes
yep.
maybe, but for the most part, it's convincing the parents this is the right book slash series for their kids. And social media isn't always great for that. So, other digital means like ads, hopefully, will help you figure that out. But I think at the end of the day, you seem to be having a good time with it, and that's the most important. You have a very
Oh yeah.
deep passion for this. So, do you have a timeline for the 7 books quite yet, or not yet?
Oh yeah. I my plan is to publish one every 6 months. So I
Nice.
even my very first book, I put the schedule, the date I change from month to month, but basically it's January and July. So the next 4 books will be what, 2 more years from now, and then I'll have all 7 published.
That's awesome. That'll give you time to figure things out. Really, that first book is the funnel into the
Yep.
adventure, into the series. So once the 7 book series is up, what's next? Are you planning on writing more of Read in a different series, or continuing with the middle grade vein, or what are your thoughts?
Oh yeah, I'm definitely decided and established myself as a middle grade author. So, I've like I said, I have ideas all over the place. So like every day I'm like, well, I could, become a ghostwriter, or I could, write a pen name, and I could write different genres, because sometimes it can feel, what's the word? You get a little envious, a little jealous. You see, someone writing a thriller adult novel, or a, a not a fantasy. There's a couple of genres that are like really hot, and you have a ton of readers that just consume, and you're like, oh, I know I could write that. But I'm committed to being a middle grade author. So my first idea is I have a couple of trilogies I'm thinking about writing and going into KDP, which I haven't done it yet. For a while, I was scared to go into KDP, because for a while there, it was like every day you heard some new author being kicked off the platform because all
Yeah,
bots
it
are stealing
happens.
your content. But then I read about authors that didn't even have their books in KDP who were also getting targeted by the bots. So I'm like, well, it's just a gamble to risk. So when I signed up for Brian Cohen's class, I want to explore with their team and be like, hey, these are all the different ideas I have. Because I think maybe I should write a couple of standalone novels just to practice, the launching, the releasing, the targeting, the marketing, all that stuff. Because each time you'll learn a little bit from that. So I'm going to kind of get with them and decide. The trilogies I'm looking forward to, because it's an idea I came up with 30 years ago, and I've written the
Oh, wow.
story. Yeah, I've written the story like 3 or 4 times. I actually collaborated 10 years ago with a friend of mine, and we wrote the first novel together. I did all the dialogue, plotting, characters, and he basically did all the description. And he was the one that
Oh,
he was a,
interesting.
yeah, he was a published poet, and he taught me how to like think with descriptions, because up until that point in time I was kind of like, I don't even like it, they walked in a room, who cares? But then like he got yeah, exactly. The was that the white page syndrome, or I can't remember what it's called, but anyways, he kind of taught me how to like use the environment that they're in to kind of describe and use poetic language. So now I'm like obsessed with description, and I put actually too much of that into my books, and my editor's always like, no, no, you can't do crazy over here. Take that out. Um, but anyways, this particular trilogy is about time travel. It's about these people who have the ability to stop, pause, and rewind time. And time is a perception, and it's not just one person, but it's like a group of kids. So it's almost kind of like the X-Men, mutant, Marvel type of like super people,
Hmm.
but it's just focused on these kids that can manipulate time, and they have to interact with each other. And so I feel really strong about the concept, and I love the characters I've already created. So I'm just going to take the adult characters and shrink them or rewind time to make them as kids in kind of like a school for time sensors, and then go from there. So that's kind of like my next pet baby I love project I want to do, but I haven't decided if I'm going to do that very next or simultaneously, or if I'm going to do some of these standalones first to kind of get more practice and then launch that with a better launch.
Yes. No, I'm just kidding. The answer is write them all at the same time. No, I know a lot of people. I don't actually do well writing more than one book at a time. Some people are great at it. It's ironic because I have literally more than once written more than one book at a time, even though I tell people I don't like to. Generally, I like to keep my stories focused on, one at a time, get it done, get it done. But I think that's cool. That sounds like a really fascinating premise. Standalones can be fun. I've only written one. So I don't have a lot of advice on that front. As much as I try to write standalones, it's hard. It's very challenging because there's always a temptation to make it bigger than one story. And I'm sure you'll find that. I don't
Yeah.
know if the temptation will be the same in middle grade, but even with my current standalone book, I did leave it slightly open just in case I want to write more. I could. A lot of people get to the end, they're like, I'm very satisfied with the story, but I want more, and I'm hoping he's deciding to write more. So it's, that's kind of how I like to do things. Um, but yeah, I mean, that's really exciting. The good thing is that you actually have these ideas. You said there's no lack of ideas. The last thing I do want to ask you, and this is a little bit of a strange question, because you're
Sure.
not going to write adult books. You're planning on staying in the middle grade. But I would, ironically, there's definitely a lot of adults that still haven't learned emotional health,
Yeah.
proper emotional regulation and health patterns. So what do you recommend for them? Books like this, or are you hoping that we'll see more, adult epic fantasy, epic fiction, whatever books that address this challenge for adults?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think it depends on the adult and where they're at in their journey. So one thing I haven't even brought up, but is part of a dual concept I came up with when I started publishing these books, was because I knew I was wanting to target parents. I was thinking of, how can I help parents improve their emotional health? So one of my ideas was to create a YouTube channel where I create these 5-minute videos based on all the knowledge and the books that I've read over time, and kind of create these complex concepts into simple to use tools that parents who are really busy don't have time to read all these books or to go to
Mm.
therapy or do all these things to improve, but they know they need to, and try to give them actionable stuff that's super simple. Have you ever read the book Atomic Habits,
I
or
know, but
heard
I've
of it?
heard it's very, very good.
Okay, so that's a James Clear. That's one of the examples of someone who took stuff, because there's another book written before him called Tiny Habits by BJ
Hmm.
Fogg, and or I get names mixed up, so if I'm saying that wrong, but it's the book is Tiny Habits, and I've been reading his book, and it's great, but it's good. It's designed for someone who's already deep into studying it, like I am, but it's not great for someone who like wants the 101 or the dummies version, right? And so Atomic Habits, he took that great information and he made it super simple and super accessible. So kind of one of my goals is, once I get established as a middle grade author, is to also grow my YouTube channel and start
Hmm.
producing that kind of information. And then at some point, I want to publish a nonfiction book. And yeah, I have a working title. I'm not sure what it's going to be, but it's going to basically be around the concept of the story we tell ourselves, like how to make all these concepts really simple and dial them down and help busy parents be able to take this idea of what is the story that their mind is telling themselves and how is it holding them back and how can they tell a different story and how can they improve the story, et cetera, et cetera. So I mean, it depends on where the parent is at or where the adult is at in their emotional journey. I would say if they've never been exposed to psychological tools, like I have a friend who's my age who just started going to therapy like a year ago.
Hmm.
And he's like, whoa, like I always thought, you had to be crazy to go to a shrink. We grew up kind of that like concept,
Yeah.
right? So I would say the first step is, even if it's one of those apps where you start communicating with the therapist online, just to kind of get your feet wet and to understand, how these psychological tools work and how to like understand your own mind and be like, oh, I've always thought like this. I thought this was my identity. I thought this was the way I am, but actually it's something I learned in childhood and it's just something that I could change if I chose to and, you know, stuff like that. So I am on that journey to want to be able to create those kind of books too, where we take these complex. Because another thing I noticed too, like I listen to a lot of podcasts, and there's a book. Have you ever read How Emotions Are Made by Lisa Feldman Barrett?
I'm not, but I have heard of that one as well.
Okay, so that one is really groundbreaking in its information. It's undoing 100 years of scientific information and really getting into how our brain creates our emotions.
Hmm.
And so I listened to a conversation with her and Andrew Huberman,
Hmm.
and I loved it. But that's because I've spent years studying this stuff and understanding the jargon. But if somebody was brand new, didn't know anything about emotional health, and they just started listening to that podcast, they would get discouraged because they would just be lost. Like, what? Neurobiological? What? And they would
Hmm.
just, be lost. So that's kind of like my goal is I want to take all this information that's already out there and simplify it and be able to give it to parents in a simple way. YouTube videos, my own books. So that's kind of my other direction I want to go in.
I love that. And how cool. I mean, it's definitely your passion is becoming your mission and it is becoming your life, which I think is amazing. Um, Hopefully you're able to run with it. And YouTube is its own beast.
Yeah, yeah,
So we'll just say that, but a lot of people find a lot of success on it. So I think if you do learn any secrets, feel free to let me know.
for
No
sure.
pressure. But I think it's really cool and it's awesome to hear how because I mean ultimately we have to work with the parents to help their children find these books. Why not also help the parents?
Yep.
So
Yep.
find the truth and the important, I guess, the gravity of understanding and knowing emotional health. But we could probably talk about this forever, but we are running short on time. So
Okay.
I definitely want to be sensitive to that. Before we end here, where can people find more information about you and your books if they want to check them out?
Well, I'm privileged because my name, Matt Guzman, Matt, is pretty easy. You can Google it. You can find my website. I'm on all the social media channels. As I mentioned, I'm also on YouTube, though I haven't filled a lot of videos there. But Instagram is usually my home base where I give everyone the first information. But if you go to what my website, you can sign up for my newsletter, which
Nice.
this year I'm focused on that being the number one way of getting information to having that connect direct with my readers. And I'm also going to be setting up a selling direct to my website this year. So haven't figured out all the details yet. Um, but yeah, that's my website, Matt Guzman. Google it. It's easy to find.
I love that. It always cracks me up when someone's talking to me about being an author. They're like, well, how do I find your books? I say, just Google Dan Kenner. And the look on their face, like, what? I can Google you? And sure enough, you Google me and then there's all sorts of information about me. And it's just funny. It feels good to be Googleable.
Yep. Yep.
I'll just say that. Anyway, thank you for joining me today. This has been an amazing conversation.
Thank you. I appreciate it being here.
I hope you found that as enlightening and helpful as I did. Talking to Matt was amazing because I love his passion for this subject. I love that he's crafting such great stories for middle graders. Now, I still to date have not had a chance to read his books. Every time I see them, I think I need to grab those for my son. I bet he would absolutely love them. So that's next on my to-do list. Regardless, I hope you learned a lot and that you found that whatever you have a passion for, that studying and learning about it and incorporating into your books will just bring you a lot of satisfaction. And hey, you may change somebody's life someday with whatever you're writing. Or you could just entertain them, which is kind of what I'm focused on. In any case, next week we are talking to Amy Standage about remembering self-worth and importance as an author. Now, this one sounds kind of funny or cheesy perhaps to you, but it's ironic how as an author it can be so depressing sometimes. Even though we're doing what we love the writing process, we feel so satisfied getting our stories down. There's still something isolating about authoring. And when that negative feedback comes in, it's sometimes hard to remember your importance and self-worth as an author. So join us next week for that conversation. As usual, if you would like to join me on the podcast, head to thecasualauthor.com, fill out the pitch form. If you're watching on YouTube, I would love it if you could like, share this, comment, let your friends know about the podcast. Happy to, share the positivity and love wherever we can. And if you have any questions, feel free to email me at authordkenner@gmail.com. Or, of course, you can just message me in the form at my site, dankenner.com, which, thecasualauthor.com will redirect you to the right place. Thanks for listening, and I look forward to talking to you next week.